talking about. Cool. Welcome everybody. Hey, how's it going? Nice to see everybody. Mike Collins, Executive Director of the Midwest Brand Center. Thank you for coming to this reading where we celebrate and have coverage here are two great records retreat winners from the last 2 years. Good. Yeah, Jeffrey Wolf, Joe Young. We're so glad that you're here. I hope everything's lovely out of the retreat house. It's a lovely fun city. So I think actually well about this. I hope it's general. It's good that we're accomplishing, set up to accomplish. Talk about that. And we'll do a little reading, and then we'll have time for Q&A or Q's. We all have A's or something like that. Whatever you get. A couple of upcoming events. The annual Band reading is coming out here. Not page 1st. It's 21st. It's a little early. Earlier this year, so come here, check it out. I don't know how many things we have lined up, but I keep in the list. So usually we have a good number of readers. We've been doing it online, especially since probably next year, I've seen more of challenges, etc., and so forth. Ignorance running around, particularly like in educational context, which is particularly hard to start making. So we will be here to celebrate exactly the opposite of that. I'm also participating in a couple other events. There's a Youth Arts Expo that's going to be it's September 17th. It's free. The QC Rock Academy, people are familiar with that. They're sort of like having organizing. They've got 15 different groups performing, playing music, doing art. I have no idea what they're doing, but we are fortunate to be among them. This is the first time we've done this. Obviously, one of our core programs is the Commercial Anderson internship program. We'll have 4 of those interns there. They'll be reading quite some fun. We thought we were going to have like multiple minutes, but it's so much interest and so many performances. It's going to shrink down to having 4 minutes. So we have 4 of our more seasoned interns putting together a performance that might be a little bit better than actually learning some special. But we'll be there. We'll be there selling copies of the magazine and the event. It's 4 times. So it'll be a lot of good stuff. A lot of cool young artists. I think there'll be some interactive stuff. So come by, check it out. Here's some cool readings. Here's some cool music. There's a lot of talent in this area. It's a beautiful problem. So hopefully this is something that becomes annual and something that becomes an opportunity to celebrate regularly. We're also doing a reading over the Corpus manuscript museum, which is just a couple blocks from here. We're doing an anthology reading on the 24th. So we'll have a few tributes for anthologies back there. This is like the 9th or 10th anthology. So if you're curious about the anthology, go to the WBIK website, Quad Cities NPR, go to their website. There's a podcast version of almost the entire anthology. It's about, you can check it out. Almost all of it, I think there's like maybe 3 or 4 contributors in there. Hello, welcome, join us. So yeah, check that out. Come check out that read. We'll be doing something at the Public Library after that too. Still doing strong events for that. The last thing I want to bring up is that we have a celebration for life for our dear friend, long time Davenport Public Librarian, Rochelle Marie, who passed away at the end of July. We're going to do a little party, Rochelle love parties. This is true. So we're going to have a little party. We're going to have some slideshows, pictures, and opportunities for speaking on her life, tell stories, have some jokes. It'll be nice. It'll be fun. We want to be a celebration proper. It's not happening. It's normal. So September 14th will be at the Public Library. 100%. It starts with a B. Check us out online. We've got all kinds of other events coming up. Workshops coming up. Proposals. If you're a writer, if you want to do a workshop, this. We take workshop proposals. We're going to be scheduling kind of like late fall, winter, early 2023. We got some really good proposals, and I'm excited to get some of these workshops up. So if you are a writer, you have an idea to make some money for your workshop, send us a proposal. You've got all the information on the website, which you set up with some time set up. But yeah, check us out online. There's a lot more stuff coming up. And yeah, so for those readings, reading is always like not getting through last year was a real cheat. We've been fortunate that we've had canceled very few events. Really, the only event that we've had to cancel is our Children's Literature Festival. It's like 600 to 800 kids in one space. That's a bit crazy. So we haven't been able to do that. We've done some other things to do that. But this reading last year was really one of the only things that we've had to cancel since the pandemic, which I think for a little agency that came like us as a show of strength. I'm so glad that we're back here. I'm so glad that we're back. Our neighbor's house where we live, where we rent space, and we're out on programs in this room, in this space. Before I introduce our readers, we want to thank the Illinois Arts Council agency who makes everything that we do possible. They support all of our programs and operations that we have going on. To them, we also want to thank Dr. Nicholas Shamas, a terrific writer in his own right, but also is a long-time supporter of this event. Space to develop project. He couldn't make it today. He was a very busy man. He was a cardiovascular surgeon, so like trying to get him to things. Hopefully, he's out there. He can hear us. We love you. Thank you so much for our first reader. We're going to go in chronological order. So we're going to have Jeffrey come on first, since he's waited the longest. We've all waited the longest. We're so glad. Jeffrey Wolf was the recent finalist for the third fiction prize in the Arkansas International his stories have appeared or are forthcoming in Gulfstream, Viscom, JewishFiction.net, and others. He has an MFA from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. Go Allison Joseph, friend of the team, and he teaches English at Columbia College Chicago, where I got my MFA. Please welcome and give a big hand to Jeffrey Wolf.
I'm from Chicago. I write about Chicago. Before I read some of my stuff, I hope you will indulge me. I wanted to read an excerpt of a story from my friend and mentor Peter Horner that takes place in this general area, the sort of Mississippi area of Western Illinois. So just sort of a tribute to being here. And I mean, Peter's a way better writer than I am. And you heard Peter, and then you hear my stuff, you see how I'm just sort of like copying him, not as good. But you can see because I get stuff first. So this is from Peter's first book, Esther Stories. The story that I'm going to read an excerpt from is called Thumbs. They found him the same afternoon they found her, 2 days after her husband discovered her car in a parking lot of a supermarket in Galesburg. He was leaning against the ruins of an old corn crib, still weeping, his head between his knees. He'd broken both his thumbs in a rusty hinge. When they bandaged them up at the jail in Aledo, his thumbs were black. Out near New Boston, Illinois, floods are so common that the land is soggy, no matter what the season. Even so, people say, The Mississippi moves a little slower in their part of the western edge of the state. To honor their dead towns, they say. Industry, except of course John Deere, you can't kill John Deere, people say, has long since moved south, and even north, anywhere but here. In 1958, the National Park Service described New Boston as, quote, a charming old town originally laid out by Abraham Lincoln when he was a junior surveyor in New Salem. Now a single store remains open on Center Streets, a Casey's Mini Mart. And if you want to tour the museum on the first floor of what used to be the Lincoln House Hotel, you can call one of two numbers written on a cardboard sign tagged to the front door and ask for either Debbie Shamrock or Eleanor Lloyd. On the river, at the edge of the town pier, there's a floating gas station for fishermen where you can buy Pepsi, ice, and lures. In the other direction, along Route 827, where it intersects the Great River Road, are the remains of an old Greek revival mansion. Grass growing up between the steps, the pillars gnawed like tossed-away corn cobs. Lock Dam Road is a gravel road that looks like many others northwest of town. It is not marked, and the name appears only on the most detailed regional map, a map the sheriff had to consult before he informed the press where the body was found. He couldn't have just said they found her in a hollowed-out tree in a field on the land Steve Makovic used to rent before he split up with his wife and stopped farming altogether. That wouldn't have meant much to the out-of-town press. Unlike the other roads, which all fork, Lock Dam Road holds and eventually hits the river. At the end of it is Lock Dam number 3, which the state stopped operating in 1975. The tree, which is about a mile from the river, stands alone and must for years have been a favorite target of lightning that did finally get it. One jagged portion remains, blackened, a charred finger pointing up. People say it looked like a grave before it happened. High school kids for years used it to dump for empties. If you want to hear the rest of this story, I definitely recommend checking out Esther's Stories by Peter Warner. I don't know if they have a copy of it here. If they don't, above the library until they get it. Peter Warner's great. I'll read some of my stuff. So I write fiction, but it's all based on my family, sort of intergenerational, interconnected short stories. My Jewish side of my family, which has been in Chicago for 4 generations now. So I'm going to read a couple of those stories. This first one is called Sunday Devotion. My father and my mother remember this. The morning they sent my father, age 6, in through the window at Grandpa Max and Grandma Estes, the apartment on Whipple Street. Fitted yellow brick, the block dense and sleepy, stacked tight with courtyard-style buildings and shaded under gnarly elms. The Chicago River flowing sleepily nearby. After 10 minutes of nobody answering the buzzer, Fred drags his boys around the side and stands in the azaleas and Hugo pines outside their living room window. Then he cuts the flywire with a pocket knife and picks up my father by the armpits. The glass pane is open, and with his son on his shoulders, Fred shoves it another inch. Your mother doesn't hear about this, he tells my father. And if you break anything, it comes out of your allowance. I don't have an allowance, my father responds. But when you do, it'll start in garnishments. My uncle, age 8, and already too leaky to lift, plants himself as he watches his father maneuver mine up and into the window. He's already seeing visions of his brother's head cracked open in the soil. Fred shifts. My father wriggles. My uncle's hands hover nervously around his father's waist. Cut it out, Barry, you're not helping, Fred calls down. Then a moment of release, and the boy tumbles inside. The boy who'd been grinning through his skin never met an off-limits place he didn't desire. And what then? As his eyes pierce the dim and the room, grim and joyless on a good day, forms at unknown angles. An alien place now, dark and hostile, high jutting edges and hutch desk and cupboard. Does he feel wonder or fear? And where are his grandparents? Away, asleep, dead, or simply deaf and oblivious, their minds wandering in time? Does he sprint to the door or peek around through them first? My father no longer remembers. Only that his grandparents were, in fact, home that morning, and they were still old. In those years, Max and Esther were already ancients. To my father and my uncle, they were never more than shades, vague impressions. The boys spent far more time with their mother's parents. Grandma Tilly, who hugged my father tight and slipped in dollar bills with the socialite's discretion. But his father's parents, stiff and aloof, strangers he was told to kiss on the cheek. Esther made hard matzo balls. You could take them outside and play catch. And she baked strudel. Max had once owned a business, both from the old world, but neither had accents. What did they sound like? Neither my father or my uncle could say. Fred grumbles as he comes in, complains to Grandma Esther and her unhurried waddle. She forgot they were coming, she says, her voice without apology. She retreats to the kitchen. Max says nothing. He rarely speaks. Pressing his feathered thin joints into his cane, he inches. He may collapse at any moment. The prospect of this, my father recalled, was a secret source of amusements. Now peopled, the flat shrinks back to itself. Faded, stained, odorous, mothballs and mildew, the latter a constant as close to the water. Even the colors, pukey greens and yellows, seem part of the smell. For years, Social Security checks have paid rent here. Scavenging is frequent. Scanning the cabinets, Fred can't find a silver lighter he's been eyeing and curses his brother Gil. He yells to his mother about the value of a good lock. Even worse for the boys, there's nothing to play with, not even crayons. They jostle for a spot facing the second-hand TV. So long as Barry's trying, he wins easily. 2 years separate them, and their relationship pinions between partners and rivals. A year prior, my father destroyed my uncle's favorite record, Beneath the Rocking Horse, because he liked the sound it made. My father and my uncle remember this too. Fred helping Max to the sagging red chair and covering his body with a tablecloth. Their father lathers on the cream, steams a towel, and begins carving out their grandfather's face with a straight razor. His delicate movements with the blade, a soft touch they've never seen from him. Fred bursts into rooms and, when tired, collapses like a blown-in building, who teases their friends with acid wit and spranks them viciously when they misbehave. He attends to their grandfather's face, the razor's search, a slow caress. The old man sits, eyes closed, helpless, still except for his constant shakes. The tremors of old age, all that betray him as living and breathing, which Fred now navigates with steady focus. For the boys, Grandpa Max inspires avoidance more than fear. Does he even know what year it is? Usually they're bored restless in this place, but today they watch mesmerized as their father shaves their grandfather. Fred's hands brush Max's chin, steer it gently to expose spots missed. He pats palmfuls of barbasol onto each cheek. The sharp sandalwood musk invades the room. For a moment, their grandfather's face shines. Then another smell rises, sweeter, and Grandma Esther emerges with a steaming strudel. I'll read two more short stories. Hopefully we're done on time. All right, so this is a new piece. I haven't read it yet. So this is called Identity Theft. My father's enduring image of his mother is her presence in the other room. Bev hosted the neighborhood mahjong game, and the ladies sat there in the kitchen of their 4-room flat on Christiana, kibitzing and laying tiles. The tiles click. Bev's tongue clicks. Twice a week, she appeared as class mom in McCracken Elementary, and her softness enveloped the other children. Warm hugs chilled by labored weeds. How her eyes could narrow in a blink. How she screamed when she found my father atop the fridge with bedspread cake. How she fussed over the shape of the pillows when guests were arriving. She made amazing briskets, but only for company. Her friend and the boys, she cooked hot dogs, meatloaf, TV dinners, all foods my father now refuses to touch. The click of the tiles, the squawk of her voice, her minions, the famous composers, staring blankly from the living room wall, judging my father while he pushed toy trains across the carpet. Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, and a fourth, Mendelssohn, a Jewish composer, whose portrait she found in a library book and had blown up in photos. Beth wasn't musical, not even a little, but she wanted their home to have culture. She stuffed the same two tablecloths down a chute to the shared basement. She plugged her ears when the Brahmins yelled downstairs. She made sure her boys' shirts were tucked and unwrinkled, their collars laid flat, and she sent them outside to play. Her health was never great, and for years it kept declining. She stressed, she ate, she refused to see a doctor. Still, the end came quickly. Peritonitis and sepsis caused by an ulcer in the small intestine. When they finally got her to a hospital, it was too late. My father was 20 when it happened. The real shock, though, came a month later when the collection calls started. She'd opened a credit card in Fred's name. For years, she hid it, paying the minimums and racking up interest. Eventually, they found the statement in an old shoebox in the closet. She owed $10,000. Luckily, my Uncle Barry had just started law school. His legal know-how was a few shekels from nothing, but he knew just enough to sound competent. Enough to argue that it wasn't Fred's debts, that it was fraud. The person who really owed them was dead. Ultimately, the bank backed off. It was my first legal win, he told me. Then again, maybe they just felt sorry for us. Financial crisis averted, they found themselves saddled with a crisis of faith. It wasn't how she did it. The logistics seemed perfectly plausible. She was the one home when the mail came. But that she did it. That was never one to hide much of anything. Joy, annoyance, outrage. She wore them all openly. Sit long enough within range of the kitchen phone, and you hear the business of every person on the block filtered through her tabloid judgments. Yet for 17 years, she held this secret. For Barry, she suddenly became interesting. It felt like a spy novel. His mother leading a double life. He imagined fake passports, globetrotting flights, dalliances with black ties and cocktails at European casinos. Who's to say it wasn't possible? She was home alone so much. Fred away working, the boys at school, at play, at their own jobs. My father washed dishes at Hearn's hot dogs. Uncle Barry delivered pizzas. None of them knew what she did with all those hours. None of them had asked. They hadn't even imagined. Their mother's whole life, a fearful blank, a book of empty pages, shut and shelved. Fred found himself rocked by anger. They had been fighting silently for years, mostly about her health. If she wants to go to pieces, I can't stop her, he'd tell friends. Let her do what she wants. Towards the end, it had been not coldness, really, but distance. He was working past 8, on the road weeks at a time. Their paths barely crossed. But this was different. A clear slap in the face. A bold, unspoken accusation in the grave. He didn't make enough money for her, which was baloney. Had he been schlepping across the Midwest for 26 years, kowtowing to the blame of Ohio and Northwest Indiana for his own amusements? They hadn't lived some gilded life by any means, but they sure as heck weren't broke. The boys got what they needed, and sometimes a few things they wanted too. Bicycles, baseball gloves, tuxes for the prom. Sure, it might not have been as nice as the other kids had, but he delivered. What gives, Bev? Ashamed to be seen as the wife of a modest carburetor salesman? That was the rub, though. She hadn't bought extravagant things. None ever turned up. Months and even years later, when their home was still releasing artifacts from the void, plastic playing tiles swept under the fridge, a letter once folded into my father's lunchbox. They couldn't find one thing she'd obviously bought on the card. Sure, she had a few outfits for special occasions, some jewelry here and there, but nothing exquisite, nothing the other wives didn't have. That's what stung me the most. At some point, she must have known, right? Did she never pay it off? How else did she think it could end? Maybe that made it easier, knowing she wouldn't live to see the consequences. Even when the end was clear, she didn't tell Fred about the card. It had gone on so long by then that maybe she couldn't. Dead or alive, people would say what they were going to say, but Bev still had her pride, and that too she took to the grave. In her waning hours, Fred sat with her in the hospital. Beneath the papery gown, she was pale and drenched in sweat. Already she smelled of death. She raised her head and measured increments. If you want to say I told you so, now's your chance, she said. I don't think I want to, he said. Leaning over her, he looked old and young at the same time. Bags and wrinkles around his eyes, but the eyes themselves, the doors blown open. He looked like a lost child, like he was made of tissue and might float away on the next breeze. He promised her he wouldn't marry again, and she didn't answer. What was there to say? What happened to us, Beth? He said. I feel like I never knew you. I feel like you might be onto something, she said. There were good times, right? There were. Despite the drugs, pain spasmed through her gut. She thought about those composers on the wall, great men who spent their days playing with sound. How she would have loved to learn cello or take a drawing class. A junior high art teacher once told her she had promise. She let her head fall. The pillows felt like empty sacks. No one was coming to fluff them. So I'll read one more. Anyone watched Living Local earlier today? This is the piece that I excerpted, local TV. And this piece is in direct response, I guess you could say, to a story that I love in this book. Both stories are about weddings. This piece is called The Edgewater Beach. They called it the Jewel of Uptown, a slice of Royal Monaco dropped on Lake Michigan's humble shore. Pink stucco towers, oak and marble everywhere. Frank Sinatra and Betty Davis, Nat King Cole and the King of Sweden, frilly showgirls, big band belting, the young and beautiful floating across the beach walk, wrapped in a full July moon, miles of glimmering water. Today, only one building remains, saved from the wrecking ball because there were enough permanent residents to form co-op. There's a foot and ankle clinic on the ground floor. Still, the grand pink arms of its Maltese cross rise above Lakeshore Drive, whispering romance to anyone who listens. The album tells the story, part of it at least. Fred in a white suit, black bow tie, white carnation on his lapel, his cheeks clean like a baby's, smooth and edible. How her mother can't stop touching him. Tilly's giddiness lives on even today. And Bev, the bride, who knew long before that her best look was a slight pout, remains placid, a little dour. For the group shots, she allows a hint of smile. Her elbow-length gloves chafe her forearms. Are they still gloves at the end of the wrist? More like satin sleeves. And she wants so badly to scratch, but that doesn't invade her face either. A face curated for all eyes to follow. Except they aren't, are they? Somehow, everyone's watching Fred. He throws smirks left and right. Everyone loves Fred. All throughout the ceremony, when it matters most. Though in that moment, all she can see is the room. Gardenia bushes line the stage behind the hookah, but standing at the threshold, about to march, it's so obvious she's getting married in a conference room. All the flowers in the world couldn't hide it. Flat walls, linoleum panels, dinky American flag draped in back, all the money they spent. And they're even getting a discount. Mr. Dewey, the owner, has a soft spot for veterans. He came down personally to shake Fred's hand. Later, she'll want half the photos from the ceremony burned. He charms at the reception. Even his codfish aunts come alive when he visits their table. Her cousin Evie brings him cocktails and sweets, then pushes her way into every photo, even the cake cutting. On the dance floor, while Fred cajoles with his friends, Uncle Irv gestures at her new husband, winking through his martini. Hope we're not paying by the hour for this one. Shameless chucklehead. She can punch him. Sure, it's all teasing, but she knows what's underneath. Maybe because she's felt it too. Eternity's a long time. And then there's his family to endure. His joyless parents, his angry siblings, those long, pale faces. Chill of Russian winters just looking at them. Package deal though. You buy the extended family along with the warranty. Just get through this, she tells herself. And then what? And then. Out back, she joins the misfits getting air. A middle-aged man from a different wedding lights her a cigarette. Her view is of rubble, concrete boulders and sleeping toothy machines. The city's filling in the lakefront to extend Lakeshore Drive. The Edgewater Beach, no longer at the water's edge. Mr. Dewey's unfazed. promising Olympic-sized pool, a new cocktail lounge. The Edgewater Beach will live on, proclaims, as marvelous as ever. Not even the March of Urban Progress can stop the grandest city in. Not even the March of Urban Progress can stop the grandest party in Chicago. She's heard the backfill came from the west side, from where they're digging the new expressway. Shards of old Maxwell streets, where her parents and Fred's both lived after migrating from Europe. She feels like they should eat something. The water's still there, just further out, more of a sliver than it used to be. It's not elegant, far from it, but something peaceful about all those rocks just sitting around being. Something about this stolen quiet that she wants to last. Maybe this is what life is, she thinks. A handful of moments when you wake up and look through your own eyes. Later, when the night is winding down, he'll find her at the edge of the dance floor. It's there in the photos. I thought this was a wedding, he says. Who died? And when she doesn't laugh, he takes both her hands in his. You look sour, kiddo. What's eating you? Something in his eyes now is just for her. And I find myself longing for the photo that isn't there. The veil of night falling over the lakefront. The haze of lamplight shrinking to points, while in the sky, brushes of pink surrender to deepening blue. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
New Boston, I'm just gonna shout out my that's not right there. My grandparents had a fishing cabin out in New Boston, so I actually spent some time on that small beach. So I get that, the accurate, all of that very accurate. Thank you so much. Our next reader, and this year's winner, the great girl, Joey Young, who's currently working on her master's degree in writing at the University of Northern Iowa. She is from the Society of Children's Writers and Illustrators, work in progress, and placed as a nonfiction research finalist for FCBWY. She recently won Author Mentor Match. She is a former archaeologist who loves birds, bugs, and books. She is also a verified tree hugger, just as the trees. It's also very good. Please welcome.
I'm here tonight with a story about a little girl born in a community of shame. She's ashamed of who she is by what she is. And her self-doubt is fostered first in her home by her parents and touches every other aspect of her school, her town, and its citizens. It's a dark story. So you can imagine my happiness in finding out that Midwest Writing Center's tagline is write more light into your life. I'm grateful that the Midwest Writing Center and Dr. Shamus have given me the ability to do that for a whole week at the lovely Bennett House Retreat Center. My work in progress is titled Nadia and the Trouble She's In. Jeff made an important observation this morning during our interview by the Quad Cities Living Local program on WHBF-TV. What should be pointed out is Nadia's name spelling. It's spelled like mommy. So Nadia and the Trouble She's In. I'll read a section of my manuscript for you now. Nadia and the Trouble She's In, Chapter 1, Monster Inside. Of course you know what a birthday is, but have you ever heard of a birth night? Dr. Graves and Nurse Payne drove all the way to Greentown, a beautiful place, to attend this home birth. Turn right at the corner of Garish and Grant, and you will reach your destination. Graves and Payne parked and looked up at the silent Victorian home, where they were to perform the delivery. A storm had overtaken Greentown. The wind shrieked, gathering up leaves and a swirl around the house. An upstairs light gleamed down upon them as they rushed, hunched under an umbrella to the front door. A radio blared in the entryway, setting everyone's nerves askew. It was a home birth made strange by the rattling windows and flickering house lights, and stranger still by the fact that the parents 59 feet in his usual illegible way, the way of all doctors, as it is taught in the advanced medical school course, scribbled scripts for the fatigue physician. Breaking news, the Green Science Laboratory imploded moments ago, came the tinny voice from the nearby radio. The announcer was outside in the wind and rain, hollering over the gales into his microphone. In case you didn't know, he continued, an implosion is the opposite of an explosion. The lab simply turned in on itself and disappeared. Gone. It's all gone. Even upon the arrival of their baby, the new parents were not joyous, and little notice was taken of the child. Turning from the signing of the birth certificate, Dr. Grace nodded to Nurse May. They gathered their coats to leave. The infant lay quietly cooing and giggling to herself in her nursery bed. And it was then that they realized that the little one wasn't like other babies, and not just because of the hat.
Yep.
No, the girl was undeniably unordinary. Her parents, Jerome and Lucretia, stared glumly down at their wiggling bubble as she lay by her mother's bedside. The baby's skin was tinged green with an ever so slight pattern. She resembles a snake, said her mother, not a little disgustedly. The parents noted that the child's nose was high and hooked like a raven's beak. Her eyes were most astonishingly light green at the edges, shaped like a wolf's, and she had tiny teeth that were sharp like a piranha. Secretia and Jerome made the doctor and the nurse to be on their way, shut the door behind them, and wrapped their new daughter tightly in a blanket. They closed their lungs and their minds. The parents named the child Nadia. She lived up to it. Mostly, when Nadia was naughty, her parents told her, "You're bad," but didn't teach her how not to be. They were from the knock it off and cut it out school of parenting. On Mondays, Nadia spoke only in bird voice. On Tuesdays, Nadia chose the quieter, spider voice. Cut it out! On Wednesdays, Nadia counted her steps. When she got up to the really high numbers, she had to wait, knee poised in the air, so she could say the next number and then take another step to begin again. This sometimes made walking down school always a challenge. Thursday was poison ivy patch day. On Fridays, she was allowed to visit the library. She'd approach the crumbly stone gargoyle sentries, Boo and she, standing guard outside, quickly checking her surroundings. Nadia would give them 2 marmalade sandwiches once at dark, just the way they left them. The librarians watched her from their little windows. They were always giving her strange looks. As Nadia grew up, she learned to stop bothering them with all her curiosities. Librarians sometimes grow weary of questions. How can lions and horses and zebras and sailboats all have nails? And why are our pointy teeth called canines if we're not dogs? Saturday was back day. Nadia loved to stay in long enough to get wrinkly skin. Brain feet, brain hands, oh! Sunday was the day her parents dedicated to training Nadia to live normal for her school week. As much as they did not actually parent her, they certainly cared about her appearance in public. Oh, how she withstood the painful hair control. Sundays are horrid, complained Nadia as her mother ripped a warthog brush through her long red hair. Without the brushing, Nadia's hair tended to be more like peapod tendrils. We certainly don't enjoy Sundays either, said Secretia. But you must be presentable. Your poor father and I, the pains we suffer. Nadia endured makeup rubbed into her skin to hide the green beneath. Remember, don't touch your face in your classes, Jerome warned her. Never, thought Nadia. Eyes wide at the thought. The kids were terrible enough. Bad things happen even to the best of families, her mother would say wistfully. Over time, Nadia grew to understand that it was her very existence that was the bad thing. There was a gentle nuzzling of whiskers from her inner sleeve. She pushed a raisin up her wrist when her mother looked away. Stay still, Ratty, Nadia fiercely whispered to her arm. Normal kids do not carry rats around. Ratty stuffed his cheek with a treat. They're boss, he mumbled, as he proceeded back to the crook of her elbow, toenails tickling as he went. Nadia could not explain the energy inside her or all the questions that seemed through her. She couldn't help it that her favorite breakfast food was strawberry ice cream sprinkled with barbecue chips, any more than she could help it that her mother's silk scarves made wonderful jump ropes. And sometimes she wondered how it felt to chew with her mouth widely open. Answer? Oh, great. That was the girl's life, just like you're like the girls, and you don't question it, do you? Well, neither did she. Except that there was all that troublesome trouble that she was looking into. The anger of her parents, the looks of horror on her classmates' faces, on her show and tell days. All young children know that in the span of time it takes for them to grow up, a sort of weight of life happens to them. When they become adults, their ability to find amazement becomes increasingly difficult until one day it's gone altogether. Try as they might, they are destined to become dull adults. Nadia spent many childhood nights in bed anticipating a fight she had against the enemy of change. She would silently vow to herself, "You won't get me. I will never forget all the things that are amazing and fun in the world." But that was many years ago. Exactly 11 years after Nadia's stormy birthday, the small family sat at the dinner table. The clock ticked to 1 minute before midnight, and Jerome, the connoisseur of gas station pizzas, stood and announced, "It is time for the rededication ritual." He cleared his throat. "I pledge to the challenge of another year of raising this child properly in the ways of our forefathers and their forefathers before them. Gallant protectors of our beautiful green town, grant that it stay forever free of the superstitious ones. Your birth night is acknowledged." He nervously looked around the room. Secretia put her hand in his as she rose to speak. "My misguided ancestors' deeds will not reflect upon our comfortable lives. Protected by our beneficence, the elders, the magistrates, I take responsibility for my bloodline and reaffirm my loyalty. Our life shall remain stable and happy, so long as we continue to raise our child in the ways of the community. I commit to our daughter's 11th year." In recognition of the occasion, a single piece of birth night cake was set before Nadia. It was of the darkest chocolate, bitter and lovely, its 11 candles aglow. Below her favorite black hat, which she was allowed to wear only on her birthday, a smile grew. Nadia especially enjoyed her birthday because it was the itchy time every year that she would shed her skin and grow a little taller. Have you ever squeezed plain glue on the backs of your hand in order to have the pleasure of peeling it off after it dried? Imagine the joy that Nadia felt every birth night. But never, not once ever, was the new fresh skin not green with splotches and stripes like a snake's. Nadia wished she would emerge less weird. At precisely 11:59 p.m. on her 11th birthday, as she stared at the candles jutting from her cake, Nadia made an important decision. She closed her eyes, inhaling slowly, and made her no more little nonsense, silliness, inappropriateness, and resistance. No more being a weird kid, she vowed, as she blew the candles out. The flames guttered and eventually had to be snuffed out by their father, who licked his fingers and pinched the candles impatiently. "Your birthday's over. Get take off the hat," he said. "And go scrub your skin. It's getting all over the floor," said her mother. Nadia did as they told her, determined as she was to succeed in her birthnight vow. The problem with Nadia's new plan, however, was the monster inside her. At least that's what she had named the troubling changes in her body and mind recently, and they weren't the kind of changes that had been explained to her and her classmates last year in the health and wellness section of the classroom. No, her changes felt odder than that. She felt more conflicted. She saw things from an argumentative perspective. As time went on, she had to fight down horror of her parents told her what to do. It made her feel a little dizzy, like she was keeping this thing down inside her. Despite the non-health and wellness changes going on, Nadia willingly combed her wild red hair using the stuff her mother had gotten to tame the curling vines. And she discovered that by simply nodding and pleading, apologizing as her parents yelled, she would get in a lot less trouble. This wasn't easy for a girl filled with zest and zen. "Just do it, Nadia. Sometimes it must be done. The littlest lives are not worth all this worry," said Jerome, as he hammered a wooden sign into the Gordon's vegetable garden. I want my garden to look like your herb garden. If there's an ant colony in the middle of it, then kill them. Nadia held her shovel firmly. They dug down into the center of the ants hole. The ants were going crazy. She could almost feel their tension and alarm. There were ants carrying baby larvae, wiggly white cocoons to safety. But we can move your garden over a few feet, Dad. It won't be any trouble. Life is not for the soft, he answered, gesturing to the hole in the ground. Well, a heat rose inside Nadia's stomach and rippled outward to her legs and arms and upper neck. She was sure her face was bright red, but her father did not notice as he grabbed the shovel from her and brought it down hard in the center of the ant's nest. That was when her fingernails lit on fire. Clenching her hands into fists and doubling over from a scream that was happening inside her skull, Nadia ran inside the house, away from her father and the horror of what he was doing. Guilt racked her insides, but she felt helpless. She was panting when she reached her room, hurrying into the shower. Can't talk, she said over her shoulder to her cat's fuzzy pillow, jumped from the windowsill and tried to follow her. Are you okay? He said as the bathroom door closed. In the cooling water of the shower, she noticed 4 tiny crescent burn marks on her palms, but the water quenched most of her pain. Garden's in, announced Joe later that night over microwave lasagna. Well, thanks to you. Sorry, Dad, Nadia said. Secretia patted Nadia's shoulder. It's all right, she said. Sometimes men forget that we girls don't enjoy nasty ants and bugs like they do. Nadia's spine snapped upright. She immediately pushed her chair from the table and bolted toward her bedroom as quickly as she could, saying behind her back as she went, "Thank you very much for dinner. Good night." Chapter 2, Snakes with Wings. By the time summer ended, Nadia saw less disappointment in her parents' eyes. She was proud that her self-improvements were complete. No more weird kids, she told herself over and over. Instead of entering her new 6th grade classroom wearing furry socks on her hands so that she could run on all 4s like the wildebeests she saw on nature programs, she walked slowly and made sure to introduce herself politely to her teacher. "Hello, I'm Nadia," she said, then wrote it on a name tag in bold, not messy, evenly spaced letters, N-A-D. The other kids read it curiously, but no one corrected her. And for the first whole week of school, even when everybody else stopped wearing their name tags, she kept hers on. 6th grade was going to be her year. Yeah, Nadia's life was definitely easier, though much more boring, with all the quiet sitting and hand raising, not wording. At least the other kids didn't look proud at the opposite end of the lunch table, staring down at her, whispering how weird she was. Now she was simply left alone, which was better than the W word. By week 2, everybody was excited about the yearly Green Founders Day Festival, which was to be held on the 3rd weekend after school started. Everyone in Nadia's school soon got busy making posters and history trifolds. Main Street downtown bustled. The smell of oil lanterns filled the streets as businesses prepared for the city's one-night career turning on the wall electrical tower flowing in green. The townspeople were proud of their history, dressing their parts of blacksmiths and candle makers, craftsmen, and farmers. The women made biscuits and pies from scratch and sewed skirts to wear to the festival, while some tourists met in groups to wash their laundry in the Green River. The women's voices rose in laughter as they splashed each other on the dock. Nadia enthusiastically worked on her Founders Day poster. She'd chosen to research the earliest history of her town. It had been a curiosity to her how the Green Founders Day was celebrated with no details as to how it was actually founded, and that the founders were heroes who rid the land of the superstitious ones. The Founders Day festival could be scary. By night, some of the townspeople dressed up as fierce witch hunters, and some of the townspeople dressed up as hideous witches. Everyone would clap and applaud during the evening's finale. All the witches played acted being burned at the stake. Then the town's magistrates would take the stage in their festival finery to remind everyone that historically, witches were fortune tellers. They made love charms and healed walls, or performed incantations for gullible people with make-believe illnesses. Any modern version of a witch would never be fully accepted into Green. Silly imposters with their natural ways, not as pretty and not as accepted as the normal women. The magistrates and the audience would all agree that witches are laughable and ridiculous before they all returned to their safe homes and normal lives at the end of the festival. Nadia titled a neon poster board with a thick marker, "The Real Founding of Green, How the Founders Liberated Our Town." "It's pretty great, Fuzzy Pillow," Nadia announced. "Are you talking to yourself again?" yelled Jerome from the hallway outside her room. "Sorry," Nadia replied instantly. She'd learned early on never to be overheard talking to animals. Nadia whispered to Fuzzy Pillow. She underlined her title with a curly flourish. He glanced at her creation. Did the gargoyles tell you how to research Green's history?" Fuzzy Pillow never had this. Nadia nodded. "They did. Goo told me there were old records in the library basement, but it's a forbidden area." She asked for another sandwich. Nadia sighed. "So my poster will have a lot less information than I wanted. I'm making up for it with sparkly stickers that the other kids like though. My teacher even complimented me on them." So a forbidden library basement sounds like the kind of adventure my old friend Nadia would love. "Why can't you be happy for me that things are finally going right?" Nadia stuck her tongue out at him. Fuzzy Pillow shook his head. "When things seem to fall into place, for most people, things haven't yet. Certainly things seemed to be very much improving in Nadia's life until the day that everything changed. It was a Wednesday, so while Nadia walked around the playground at recess, trying hard not to count her stats, 6,227, she noticed a group of the meanest kids in her whole class standing near the school wall. The kids were shoving each other closer to the wall, laughing and jumping back. Then a boy threw a rope at the wall, and it whacked and left a red mark against the brick. Red? Thought Nadia, not counting the 19 steps she took to get closer to the room. Curiosity pulled her, but there was something else, something in her stomach that felt uncomfortable. She drew close enough to be out of the perimeter of boys to see the ghastly sight before them. It hadn't been ropes getting thrown against the wall. There, laying with their broken little bodies on the ground, were several snakes. Some were squiggling just a little, most were still. Nadia gasped, and the boys turned to look at her. She felt a strange prickling sensation on her scalp that quickly flowed down her face, shoulders, and into her fingers, stomach, legs, and toes. It was that monster inside feeding again, but this time she didn't stuff it back down. "You better not tell me, weirdo," said Bruce. But before he got to the last word, his face smooshed up and turned pink, and he exhaled a long sound. So the weirdo came out like weird. Nadia had not touched him, but her monster surged, euphoric, powerful, and strong. The other boys looked at Bruce curiously at hers, then their own faces contorted, and they too blew out all their air in a whoosh and fell to the ground next to Bruce, who was now panting and staring at the sky. Nadia was circling them slowly, and suddenly she was running. She ran in a circle all around the snakes and the boys, and it wasn't only really running so much as touching the ground every so often with the toe. As she raised off the grass so fast she was just a blur, she said, "Defenseless and harmless, lifeless and still. Can anyone help them now?"
Thank you so much. Before we go to questions, I would be remiss if we didn't also thank board member and admin for the Great River Writers Retreat, Shishma Collins. Some sheets of local poets. He had the contest and has kind of you've done so much work on this. We appreciate all your work. Be there to meet them, and all the stuff that comes along with your program like this. So thanks so much. Yeah, so if people have a question, we can kind of just keep it like a conversation. If you have questions. Sounds good. If you need a microphone, I'm happy to come to you. thing, yeah, but I mean, if you want to bring chairs up here, we can kind of do a conversation with them, just kind of open it up. That's what we do. Scratch the chairs. Shortly, whatever you're comfortable with, it's cool, we're keeping it casual, so, that stage is great. I've said there many times, there's some people here. So. Please.
You casual?
Yeah, go for it.
Damn. You're not.
Oh, no. Thank you.
Is it work going out by yourself, right? Nothing else to do, be more productive.
I think that it takes like the whole first day of just like depression. And so you lose that day. And then you start fresh the second day. And then I think after that, you kind of get the ball rolling a little bit. And it's so peaceful there at the Veteran Retreat Center. It's so pretty. And they've got a walking path and they even have like in the woods, they have a section that's just mown for you to walk. So it's really isolating, but in a nice way. It's weird.
And I think that it's like removing other stuff from your team gives you a chance to do like, I mean, you can't like think that, you know, everybody has, you know, only so much in the tank. And if you push yourself past that, then you're harming your outcome the next day. But then, you know, read. I mean, you know, when do we have time to just read? And I think that as a writer, reading is a very generative activity. You know, good words in, good words out. You know, meditation, all that sort of stuff that, you know, that we as writers probably should be doing to keep us in a good space that we now have time for because there's nothing else.
I'm just interested in knowing how most of you find us. Like, how did you find us and decided why want to reach out to you? As we're talking about this, you know, beyond where we are, you know, to the wider restoration. That's kind of here. Why did you decide to find us?
I had heard about the conference, but I had never attended one. But I had always wanted to. You've been on my radar for a couple of years, and then and I hadn't even realized that you offered the contest. I was wondering when your conference was, and I can't remember if I was on the site directly or if I saw something about the conference. And I was like, oh, what's that date? And so I went to your site, I think, and was looking for that and saw, oh, look at this up here. There's a little window here, and I was like, wait a minute, that's like 4 days from now. And I was like, if I throw my hat over that fence, I could actually maybe try. And so I spent those 4 days or 3 days, whatever it was, I threw stuff together and felt like, okay, I can do this. It felt good. It felt like a accomplishment I felt lucky to have even seen that you guys offered that because I think it was an advertisement for something in a writer's magazine that I'd seen at the conference or something along those lines that I'd seen at the conference, and that's what kind of drew me to the site.
Yeah, I had seen the retreat opportunity online. I forget where now. On some list of writing opportunities. I don't know if it was a blog or, you know, a more formal list filed by publication. I mean, I think that it's the fact that it is, sort of called down to the Midwest region, right? That, you know, at least when I applied, it was only people from 4 states that could apply for it. And being from Illinois state. So I think that as, I'm definitely been advised this a lot of times to, you know, look for opportunities that do narrow it in some way, so you're not just competing against everybody. You know, improve your odds a little bit, you know, when you can narrow the field. So it was definitely on my radar.
Very nice. Absolutely. Especially like starting out like where it's gonna be maybe. And it's still like that. It's still Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin. But different things.
You don't have to like what your a lot. It's an upper middle grade, so it's sort of the sweet spot for where I write, where my voice is. My voice just tends to be. I find humor in the darkness stuff, and so I'm always exploring that. And so yeah, she would be. There's a lot of need in her, and she's. Things are going to get a lot worse before they get better for her. So yeah, I'm putting her on, putting her through her paces in this piece. I'd love to introduce you to the character who's coming up next, but she's a healer. Her name is Aliba Moe, and she's a healer from the 1700s who has been placed, and you find out how later, but paradox box, and someone uses it for a casket and opens it, and she comes out. And so now she's got full English, and she's hilarious, and she has a cat that's it's been involved cat, and so it's been so much fun to write that and explore, but and I'm only about 60 pages in now. So, but I've got at least at least 3 folders full of research and full of so many things that I want to put into it that I need to learn and have, you know, have there for the world building, and, you know, just to write it. And it's been really hard finding time to do that. So this is particularly amazing for me to just have my own headspace for the file, so that I can give that over to these guys and have them talk it, and all of that goes along with it.
To answer your questions, I've been in the room next door for the last couple of days. So yesterday morning, there was just a lot of thumping. And she told me she was working out. It may have been the inner monster.
You go through a lot of humor and you laugh out loud.
I do. Sometimes I crack myself up, and I burst out, and I'm like, oh my God, that's so good. But I don't take credit for it. It's like it's there in here, and they're telling me, you know, and I'm just transcribing, you know, what's happening. And sometimes it's just a burst, you know. I love it. You have a lot of funny stuff in yours, you know, like that was on.
I think that it is, you know, the same as you said, characters, right? Like, once you know who characters are and how they'll react, you know, because we'll try to be funny in real life. So, you know, it's, and just sort of situational things. Right, was it, you know, whoever said that, like, tragedy was like underdeveloped comedy, right? Like all of these crazy things that happen in our lives, you know, take a step back, you know, it's always humor or something.
Is this your family that you're writing about?
yeah, I mean, it's all fiction. I mean, there are grains of actual things in there. I'm not gonna tell you what's what. But yeah, my family is the inspiration. My late grandfather, I keep the names for the people who are deceased. So my late grandfather, Fred, who had dementia for the last several years of his life before it was too far advanced. I sat down and interviewed him a couple times, and that sort of gave rise to projects. And along the way, there are a lot of people on that family tree who I never knew, who died long before I was born, or who were just very separate for some time in my life when they were still alive. So in some ways, I'm sort of writing to meet these people. And again, I stress it's all fiction. But it is, I don't know, like the sort of what's real is the kernel, and then in fictionalizing it, I have the leeway to make it a story, right? To make it something where the sort of unseen themes and the sort of twists and reversals and sort of dualities that make up a sort of emotionally fulfilling story can rise to the surface and carry it. I'm not bound by, well, this is what happens, and this is how it has to be written. And so that's why I always prefer fiction. Hope that answers your question.
Sure, I was hoping the credit card service turned up.
Yeah, I will neither confirm.
I have two questions to you first, Jeffrey. Your project, is it more linked short stories? Is it a novel?
Linked short stories. When it's finished, we'll see what I feel like I can call it, or whatever. If I get an editor or an agent, whatever they want to call it, I can find them.
That's true.
But yeah, it is. And again, I'll keep going back to Peter Horner, because I think, I know Peter's not watching. If he is, he would be very embarrassed if we mentioned so much. But his style is very much these sort of short bursts of stories, and then they're sort of layered together, and then there is this sort of symphonic kind of feel to it, and I think that's what I'm going for, right? Is to have these stories of characters at different points in their lives, and also different characters that face similar things. And I don't know what the book is going to look like yet. I'm lucky enough, I'm going to have another residency next year in Europe, and I'm hopefully going to take that time to sort of just put everything out on the floor and figure out how it goes together. And I'm hoping for that sort of feeling of, there is emotional resonance in all of this stuff, layering on top of each other for, 150 people.
So you understand the rules of fiction, and you have that little fictional student. How do you negotiate that with your family? Do they read the work and comment on it? Do they have they say that never happened?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've shown a lot of these to my dad, and he's very excited. My parents are very excited about it. I mean, they sort of understand. They're the most supportive people. They're great. My parents are the best, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see if when I get to things that are a little closer. I think I did at first sort of have to negotiate with my mom, because this is on my dad's side of the family. I'm exploring. My mom's side is even Jewish. And it's the same thing, which I think I said in answer to your question, that, my mom's side of the family, big Italian family, I've known, everything's been out there, we've had big family gatherings, so, the Jewish side is, or at least that side of my family, not that, and it just, the family that just happens to be Jewish. And, my dad's biological mother did, die when he was in college. So that was someone I never knew. Things going on from there. But the first story that I read, I shared it with my dad, and he's been in the audience when I've read it, and he enjoys it because that story is told from memory of this. I'll confirm that my dad at age 6 going into the window, that did actually happen. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, what's your first question? Project, is it movement, novel or?
Yeah.
Do you feel your approach to it would be very different if your short story connection versus it's like a traditional format of novel, right?
Oh, that doesn't make sense to me. A traditional novel where everything is cause and effect plots, my storytelling brain doesn't.
Okay,
It just doesn't. I connect more with sort of more organic types of stories, and memory is huge. Obviously, all the pieces that I read are in some way or another based on memory back to the past. And that's just how my storytelling brain works, and in these short bursts. And if I were to write a novel, I would think that it would be in that same sort of style where these chapters are short bursts that sort of add up to each other. I definitely feel intimidated and overwhelmed by the kind of long plotted storytelling like that Travis writing. I tried it a couple of times, when I was a much younger writer. It just doesn't have the same magic. As a writer, you sort of have a sense of what is alive when you put it on the page, and the style of writing.
Stories and on and on and on. I go, wait a minute.
it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Not sure.
I find short stories so much harder to write. I draft out and writing is easier for me than having a really tight, short form story, but,
Well, you can make it tight later.
yeah, so I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah.
One tip, read poetry. Poets are so good at brevity. I learned a lot about how to be a short story writer from just how to say a lot in a very short amount of words, and to make every word count and make them explode off the page.
And the use of imagery too. You had some of that. I have a question for you. I'm gonna call your genre magical realism, if that's okay. And I'm curious about the choices you make when the metaphor works. How do you know when it's gone too far, or it's something like talking animals? How do you make something that work? How does it come together?
I think it's the characters themselves. I think that Fuzzy Philip is and Ratty.
What's it called?
And he's actually his code name is Nomad, and he's a black witch, and they find witches and they protect them with their lives. And she doesn't know any of this yet, but they're full. These are fully realized think that's how it works, because if they're fully realized in my head, then and if I have, you know, enough in me to get that on paper the right way, then it's gonna be fully realized in someone else's head. You know, and I'm gonna, so those sorts of things that, that it's just gonna, it's gonna work.
I always think of it as a delicate balance, you have to set the reader up, as they don't know it's coming, but when it comes, they're like, okay, this is the one.
Yeah, it has to fit. Yeah, I started it, there was an earlier way that I had written Fuzzy Pillow into the narrative, and it was like page 14 or something, like way too late for Fuzzy Pillow to be talking, and, or for her to have a cat that talks, and so I had to, that's the thing, that it has to be the right timing, the right humor, the right approach, you know, and to make it work in the reader's mind, so they don't go, what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
most of the time I'm lost in talking at them, like, okay, no, for me, but it's some of them.
Not for me. Yeah, well, I have a background in archaeology, I have an archaeology degree, you know, it was always science all the time. But then at home, you know, when I wasn't in grad school, I'd be at home drawing these characters, drawing, you know, these fantastical things, you know, these beings and creatures. And, but I didn't write them yet. Actually, I did when I was in grad school, I started writing it, horrible. Terrible. I finished it. It's a novel. And there are little tiny nuggets in it, it's okay. But I had to get through that, but yeah, I was science, and I was the same as you, I wasn't big on the, you know, but now it's, I don't know, now it hurts.
So I know you mentioned that this particular work you're doing right now, it's an upper middle grade, so there probably won't be a lot of illustration and stuff, but do you plan to do any illustration yourself? Because I was seeing a website and they do like.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I have played with that idea a few times, and one of my good friends is Ruth McDonald Barshop, who is a graphic novelist, and she encourages me on the side, you know, and so I have thought about maybe doing spot art in the text, because I see the characters, and, you know, in this situation. I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
I always see
It's
those,
something that's kind of
like the chapter starters a lot
yeah,
in middle grade.
yeah. And you can still do it in that age range, and but
You still do as an adult too, I mean, you're ready, Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh, yeah.
We should all do that.
yeah, there's it's something that I'm considering. Thank you.
If not, cool.
I'm so proud.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So much for reading and all of your. Before everybody takes off, just one quick note. So the library is closed and everything is locked. So in order to exit the building, you gotta go down the elevator to the ground floor and exit out the south entrance of the building, which some of you have. Because it's first